And we are live.
And we are live. Good afternoon, good morning for those who are waking up, and good evening for those who are following us from the other side of the world. Welcome to Nice Fiction Edition 2024, to the panel on building blocks of world building. The panel will be exclusively in Anglais. Anglais is actually a language, believe it or not. It's when you speak English with a French accent or when you are French Canadian. And we have a pretty diverse panel for you today. So we're going to get a multiplicity of perspectives, not just geographic, but also genre-wise. We have two French authors, Benjamin Lupu, who is joining us from Nice. He's the only author who's live on the panel. Stéphane Arnier, who is French based in Finland. Stephen Embleton, who is a South African author currently residing in the UK, but currently in France on holidays. And Michel Laframboise, who is a French-Canadian author currently based in Ontario. Quick round table, so you could let us know a little bit more about yourselves, what your genre of predilection is, and then we will dive into the subject of how you put these worlds together, these fascinating worlds together, the process behind it, and then what you're hoping to achieve.
Oops, freeze. And we've got this famous effect of something.
I start.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah. I have a scientific formation, but I did not work a lot, but I did a lot of works of ill-paid job. My latest publication, because I publish a lot of short story, my latest publication is in this month's Asimov. So it's the latest, I have a story, and not the robot story. I was, and I still am, a graphic artist. So I build my words with a lot of image. But after publishing novels, about 20 novels in Threadpub, I started collecting my short stories in collections there. So it's all short story, hard and crunchy science fiction. Because for me, science fiction is like chocolate. And so for the world building, lot of I have maps and a lot of drawings. So that's all.
Who's next?
Thank you, Michelle. Science fiction is like chocolate. I'm sorry, I was dropped off the call. The network is a little jumpy. I'll do my best to keep up and stay connected. Stephen, over to you.
Sure. I'm South African living in Oxford at the moment. I came in 2022 through my writing, in particular my second novel, Bones and Runes, which is centered around African mythology and cultures in a urban fantasy setting. And so a lot of my research revolves around African mythology and folktale. And then the plethora of languages, particularly in Southern Africa. And that's really what I love to infuse into my world building as much as possible, representing many of those languages, some of them which are on the fringe and not really many people know about. And it's also an exciting time for those African traditional beliefs to be kind of shown to the Western audiences, particularly to, really showcase the culture that we've got without the kind of Western taint on it. So it's an exciting time to be writing science fiction and fantasy from the continent, and looking forward to discussing a lot of that today.
Thank you very much, Steve. Stefan, over to you.
Thank you. Well, I'm a French writer living in Finland right now, and I'm a writer of novels, and I'm working too in role-playing games. So I wrote 5 novels a day, on my 5th came out in February in Edition Nemos, French fantasy publisher. And I'm working in role-playing games too, like, for example, Thoan, which is a game about the famous writer Philip Joseph Farmer world science fiction. So this is a good way for me to talk about world building, because I of course create a world for my novels, and I create a lot of different kind of worlds for role-playing games. And I am really inspired by my travels, and when I write, and I spend a lot of time in New Zealand and in Nordic countries. So I really like to inspire myself with other cultures when I write. So I'm happy to be with you today and speak about world building with all this kind of international people.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Stefan. That RPG thing, I'm going to get back to it.
Yeah, with pleasure.
And last but not least, Mr. Benjamin Lupu.
Thank you for this introduction. Also a French writer, mostly in steampunk and fantasy. My first novel was a spy novel, which happens in Istanbul during the 19th century, and where I imagined that the Cold War didn't happen during the 20th century, but the 19th. So this was the occasion to explore this magnificent city, which is Istanbul. My second work is a fantasy work. You can call it murder mysteries, but in a fantasy way. There is 11 stories setting in a same city called Kiosh. So the series is called Mysteries of Kiosh. I think that just for this roundtable, it might be interesting to know that I'm a historian. So history is something that I look a lot to subvert it, to write my own stories. And also, like Stefan, I'm a huge player of role-playing games. And I build world for role-playing games and novels. And I think it's pretty different, actually. And it's a good topic to discuss, but this is how I do. And most of my novels are not set on the Western world. It mostly happens in the Middle East or the Southeast Asia.
All right. No, this thank you, Benjamin. This really rounds up the diversity that we have around the table. We have hard sci-fi, we have fantasy, we have someone who comes from an RPG background, we've got steampunk and a historian. So we're going to get a lot of different perspective, and also you have a lot of different skills, right? Stephen is also an illustrator. Michelle is also an illustrator. And so those things also provide a different appreciation or approach to how you address world building and the different elements that come into play. This is really a question for all of you, and whoever wants to speak first, please just raise your hand. But to you, and this is really broad and kind of a trick question, I guess, and really easy one for a moderator, but what is the most important element of world building to you? And I'm leaving that open to whoever wants to speak first. Michelle?
Oh, very easily, I would say first, the seed is an image, an illustration. And just so you know, because I already had 2 words for my own universe is spacefaring super gardeners. So this is like I have 5 novels in that universe, and it's constantly building. It started with that novel, but now it is with some graphic novels here. So illustration played a very big role, because it's you have to imagine it's a different planet, different ecology, so different plants, and those are plants-loving people. So the technologies will be different. And as a writer, you can describe a lot of what the culture and the language also. And history is very important. I read a lot of historical novels, by the way. So it's because if you don't read history, you cannot build a society as rich. even if it is distant civilization.
Who's next? I can go on that one. It's a tough one, ma'am, if I may. I would say that the most important thing for me when building a world is probably that it has to be a land of opportunities for my characters. It has to be something that create action, passion, emotion. It's almost a character for me. So I don't build worlds to build worlds, actually. I build worlds around characters to have them do what they do in a novel, amazing things. So this is probably how I approach the world building, which is kind of different in RPG, but also similar, because when you create something for RPG, you create a land of opportunities for your players. But it's probably more detailed in RPG. But for novels, you can build a world which can be, I think, a thin one. It's not it doesn't need to be very rich, but it has to be very, in French we say fécond. For me in English, it's probably that you can create a lot with it.
A rich terreau, a rich soil.
Fertile soil, absolutely. Thanks, Michel.
Thanks.
Yes. Yes, I think we will maybe speak about RPG later again. For me, because I really get inspired by nature, I really begin very usually my world building by the natural sceneries about my world. But as said Benjamin, the world building for a novel, it's about the novel, and for me, the first step is to think about what I want to say with my novel, and I work with a lot of theme, and what I would like to speak about in my novel, and what should my world should have in it to speak about this theme. So the most important thing for me is very different in every world I create for every novel, because it's all about what it is about in the novel.
Thank you, Stéphane, and over to Stephen.
So for me, it's about cosmology. It's the origin of a group of people in a specific place and time. But what is it that they believe? What are their traditional beliefs? Who do they pray to when they look up to the stars? Who do they curse to? What are the folk tales that those people have, passed down from generation to generation? And how does that infuse into the day-to-day living? To me, and that's something that's really emerged for me over the last couple of years in terms of the places that I've created, and those people, giving them some kind of objective in their broader life, not just the more immediate part of the story that's being told at that time. And that can infuse a lot of really interesting proverbs, sayings, quirks to a group of people. And that's exciting to me.
Thank you all. Thank you all. So, hearing you speak, and I'm going to bounce off of what Benjamin was saying, more specifically, how the world building is also a character, but also the opportunities that it provides to the characters to really become everything they could be. Right?
Yep.
But so conversely, when you're developing the world, is there a bit of a fear that you are limiting that expression for your characters, meaning that you might just write yourself in a corner where you've developed the world to a point where something's all of a sudden become impossible, and you have to either double back, start from scratch, or try to figure your way out of everything that you've put so much work into in order to achieve the results that you're looking for? And then again, that's open to anybody who wants to speak first. Benjamin, I see
Yeah.
you have the hand, so please over to you.
Yeah. That's actually I'm gonna just do a quick aside just to prepare my answer. Is just building a world can be a great way to lose yourself as an author. If I listen to myself, uh, I won't. I can only build worlds without never writing any novel. I just enjoy creating them. Um, why I say that this I have to force myself to just create the minimum viable world at first, not to create a kind of jail for my characters. That I need them to be free, and then I build my worlds all along. I write. It's a great way to keep freedom, but it can create a lot of inconsistencies in your world. So you have to be very careful. So I developed this technique to have a kind of a journal of what I create with custom habits, religions, words, because in the fantasy worlds and even in science fiction, you create a lot of imaginary things. So you have to keep track of that. I didn't do that for my first novels, and I completely lost myself. I sometimes write stuff that contradicts the first scenes, for example. But yeah, I'm more in building the minimal viable world where my characters can do interesting things, and then build all along the following my needs and the needs of the character. I just enrich the world um, as I write. I don't know if you do the same, but this is the way I found that I'm the most comfortable with, in fact.
Thank you, Benjamin. Does anybody have a thought? Yeah, Michelle, please.
Yeah, not a thought, but what you said, I'm just turning. So you see what I did. It happens to me all the time, like getting myself in the corner while writing a novel, and even with a plan. I don't know if you can see the drawing on the.
Yeah,
But,
we see it.
yeah, but
That
it's
is brilliant.
yeah, but there's a solution. There's always a solution.
That's a nice
So
one, actually.
yes, it happens. And one of my writer friend, which is an American named Dean Wesley Smith, she said, okay, I'm getting the character in a situation, and I'm writing, and the worlds develop branches out as you write. So sometimes, because I do have a thick Bible of my spacefaring super gardeners universe, and I'm not
Yeah.
looking at it because I had a map, the characters of all my, and finally, I'm not looking too much at it as I write. If I really want to check something, I check the other novels, of course. No? So, no, it's fun.
All right. All right. So Michelle's solution to writing yourself into a corner is digging a deeper hole. All right. Stephen, I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with all of that. You know, we fortunately, when you're writing a novel, you have that opportunity to go back and fix things that might be inconsistent or, more importantly, inconvenient for where you've gone. And I remember Neil Gaiman talking about the unfortunate position of being in writing for a serialized publication, like with Sandman. You know, he said, you've written something that's already been published, and you're trying to write something, you know, a month later, and unfortunately you can't do anything about it. So you have to do what every writer normally does, and it's fix the situation that you're in. But also, as far as, you know, particularly like magic and those kinds of what you would assume are limitless elements to a fantasy story. Tendai Huchu said in 2022 at AK Festival, you know, you need to create some kind of limitations to those limitless powers. It gives you things for your creativity to overcome, your characters to overcome. There has to be some kind of limitation. So yeah, we've got to write ourselves out of a paper bag sometimes. So that's our job as a writer, to bring a reader along and to make them feel like they are discovering as we're discovering.
Thank you, Steve. And Stefan?
Yes, I like to write to create my world linked to a theme. Like, for example, if I know that my main protagonist will deal with liberty or this kind of theme, I will try to build every part of the world around this theme and try to link every part. For example, if I have to create a city, maybe I will build the city around a prison, or if I create a culture or a religion, something linked to the theme of liberty and captivity or this kind of stuff. So every time I try to link with my main theme, and that creates more and more opportunity on doors to write my stories and not to be captive myself, like we say, like block in the corner, because every time my character will encounter a new place or a new part of the culture or a new character, there will all be some kind of link related to the theme for me to build the story, the plot, on my moral debate about the theme I want to talk to.
All right. No, thank you for that, Stefan. Michelle, did you want to say something?
Oh, in young adult novel, which is what the kind I'm writing. This is my latest, my 20th novel at Trad Pub. You see, there's the world building, not too complicated. It's a desert. But no, I did the illustration. It was not supposed to. But in young adult stories, I found out that the best way to construct a universe, and it's what I did in La Quête de Chaos, who had 5 novels, but it's no longer in distribution, alas. It is, you start small, okay, like a villager and something, and you discover gradually the main character, who is a youth. C'est ça, youth, young man, young woman, whatever, and discovers in the case, this is Shahas discover his own world, and his name means fire of the earth. Fire of the earth is very, very energetic and impulsive. So gradually you widen the horizons of the character, and you discover, of course, the plot progressed, by the way.
Thank you all for that. And Michelle, I'm going to go back to you in just a second. But what I'm getting from what I'm hearing from you is, yeah, you got to create your world, but you also have to leave yourself an element of discovery as a writer yourself. Everything cannot be set in stone from the word go. And because also that world also evolves with the cultures of the characters that you're writing. And eventually you're going to find out new ways to express possibly old and trite ideas, but bring them into a new fora. And then that will, in and of itself, affect the world, affect the characters. And there's a bit of an echo between the two of them that you have to keep dynamic and alive throughout the writing process. I want to move to some individualized questions. So starting with Michelle, since you were speaking last, you said, you wrote a lot of graphic novels, and everything with you starts with drawing, right? With the image and the vision. So I have a question for you on that, because what comes more naturally to you, the writing or the drawing? And do you find it easy to translate writing into a picture, or is it harder to translate a picture into words? Where does the tension happen for you as an author?
Okay, so that I wanted to write stories at first, but I always love to draw. And eventually, what happens is it's because literature in Quebec in the 70s, it was all like old white guys, dead since 2 centuries, and it was that literature. This was literature. The rest was like very, very downbeat novels by. So eventually, I turned toward comics, making comics, and yes, sometimes the image comes first, like in Mistress of the Winds, which is okay. This is in English. This is my Spacefaring Supergardener Society, by the way, and it's a woman there. There is. I started that way with a lot of illustration, but in the history, the civilization is based on the Roman Republic, the honor course, honor race, which is an honor stairway in there because it's a meritocracy. It's a very ecological, with some steampunk a bit about it, but very ecological technologies. So yes, I had a lot of difficulties drawing those dirigibles, even if I love mechanic. And so sometimes it's easier to write it than to draw it. And that's how I did my first novel ever, which is that one. And it was published in France in the 2000, and now it's republished. And it was a comic book. I tried to do a graphic novel. It was too complicated. A lot of new elements in the backgrounds. And so I decided, okay, it will be easier to write it. It was not that easier. But I continue writing novels, but I love to draw, so I try to find the time to do the both.
Gotcha. No, thank you for that insight, Michelle. Stephen, did you raise your hand in response to something Michelle said?
No, but I agree with everything that she said.
Well, you started talking about dirigibles, and so I'm stuck between either following up with the steampunk guy or pursuing this whole element of drawing. Well, I'm going to go to Stephen. So Stephen, just so you know, is part of the Sauti Collective, which is a collective of African authors of various countries across the continent in the diaspora and also Haiti, I believe. And so they all got together to create this world that is centered around a binary sun system with planets orbiting that is focused on sound and sound technology. And this comes along with a story Bible, a whole lexicon, divinities, creational myths, the whole nine, you name it, planetary, ecographies, ecologies, I'm not planetology. And so it's a massive, massive thing that once you step into it, you get a real sense of grounding, of authenticity. So Steve, since you're working as an author, but you're also an illustrator and you're also a bit of a language creator, right? Especially in terms of scripts. How do all these come together when you start working on those novels more specifically? Because obviously Sauti is a universe, but then you have to bring that universe down into something that's digestible. So how do you pull all these threads together to make something coherent that you're happy with and that you think the reader is going to be happy with and relate to?
Okay, so with everything, it really comes down to the idea of the story. So no matter who's writing in the Sauti-verse, what is the kernel of the story? And then, you start to bring in the work that's been done in terms of the world building, the magic systems, and those elements. But the one thing, and Benjamin mentioned, going into world building, the research, the number of rabbit holes that you go down, some of the research that maybe you don't really want to be doing, but you have to do, and you end up doing really the bare minimum on a certain topic, including, technical things like dirigibles and, what you really need to have on the page. But in terms of the world building, the Sauti has been really, I don't know, it's blossomed organically because of the various interests of the 11 people that form that collective. And, some who might be more technically minded, focusing on the science, people like myself working on the language or, the mythology. So we've all kind of pulled together our interests, and each person and sometimes groups of people can go off and create and just really build on the elements in that world. But the key thing with all of it is that unless it's featured in a story, it's not canon. You know, it's not set in stone, because you want people to come to it, read the story Bible, get a sense of what is there, and feel like they can add to that. There's not anything limiting them from the get-go. But yeah, in that world, it's for me, it's again, it's starting with the cosmology. It's what does that world look like from a scientific point of view, and then my folktale mythology hat kind of kicks in, and you know, what would early civilization be interpreting what's happening out in the stars in that twin solar system? What would they be thinking of? How would they be understanding their world? And then those themes come through into what we put down as the magic system. And again, with a lot of the African mythology and folktales and culture and traditional beliefs, it really does, you know, go across genres. I mean, we're talking in real life here. You know, it's science fiction, it's fantasy, all in at the same time. And that world enabled us to be able to write across genres. It's not just a fantasy world or science fiction. So we call it a science fantasy world. And yeah, the language and everything is just an exciting component of that. But as Stefan said, you know, you also working with themes in that world building. So early on, we settled on themes and used that to kind of set the groundwork.
All right. Thank you for that. Remember, guys, it's a binary star system, not a 3-star system, because as we all know by now, if you do, we have a problem.
Yeah.
For those who are familiar with the show. Stefan, come again, Michelle?
Yes. No, it's okay.
No, it's fine.
I'm wondering if it is that universe, the Saltiverse, or if it is another universe. You should write it.
The mother sound. The mother sound. If Steve, you want to give us some pointers as to what people would look for, drop them in the chat so viewers can keep up with this. And mother sound is actually up for several awards. So, you know, it's a work in progress, but it's a good one. Stefan, RPGs, huh? Look, I have to be honest with you. I always feel a little jealous and inadequate when it comes to authors who have that RPG creation background, for several reasons. A, I'm incapable of doing it. And the other is I always feel like it gives you, just like Michelle was saying with the illustrations, that reality, that immediate reality that you can actually build on many different levels, right? Because you have the landscape, you have the different characters, but it's also a much more complex process. But it's also a very successful one in some instances. I'm thinking of Stephen Erickson and I.C. Iselmont's Malazan Tale of the Fallen. Both of them started as RPG writers. And from those role-playing games, they developed one of the most successful universes in fantasy that feels almost limitless in its possibilities. So how does that work for you? How do you go from RPG to story? Is it story that drives the RPG? Where's the middle? Where does the magic happen?
Yeah, it's the same. In France, there is a lot of fantasy writers who had RPG background, but as Benjamin already said, that for me, create a world for role-playing games or for a novel, it's really different. And of course, I think as a player of RPG, when you play a lot of RPG, when you read a lot, when you create and write a lot of RPG background, you get some kind of experience with another worlds. So maybe it helps you, of course, when you work on your novels. But that's completely different too, because when you work on a novel, the story is about your character. On the story begin with your character, and evolve with your character, and finish with your character. So as I said before, I create my world to be the arena for my characters. But in a role-playing game, the only element on which you don't have any impact is the characters, because the player the players will create their own character. And when you create, like for example, a story, a scenario for a role-playing game, you don't know which character will play the story. And so that's really different. And for a novel, you create a world to match your theme on create an arena for your character to evolve on to complete their story. And for role-playing games, there is more game into the creation, that you create much more stuff because the player and the characters can go everywhere, and it's much more like encyclopedia creating world, because you want to offer a lot of playable situation available for the players. So that's really different. But to answer the question, I think it's helped you a lot when you write world for your novels, because you get some experience about everything you could think about, because in role-playing games you have to work on story, on coherence, with a lot of different stuff. So it helps, but it's a trap too. And I see many writers coming from role-playing games, and they create very, very complex worlds, maybe too complex for a novel. And that's the main risk you can have, and you create a lot of scrap that can undermine your story, because you create by reflex a lot of stuff, but you don't need all this stuff for your novel. So it's really yes, a very good experience, but it could be a trap too.
Yeah. Research is like an iceberg. You keep your research under the surface.
Like,
Yes.
I really like this
Yes.
empty iceberg theory by Brandon Sanderson, that you only create the tip of the iceberg, and you
Yes.
on the reader feel that all the big part of the iceberg under the surface, it feels real, but it's really not. Just an illusion.
But you try not to put too much overboard, over the water, because otherwise it's like a long exposition passage.
Yes, no, absolutely. I was on a panel previously, and we were talking about research also, fantasy myths and how much we should put into the research versus how much we should put into the writing. And I really like that when you talk to authors, everybody has all these questions about how you do it, and the answer is always keep it as simple as you can, man. Just don't make it too hard for yourself, because otherwise, it's hard enough as is. You don't want to make it any harder for yourself, do you? And you also want to give yourself the space to be creative in the space that you've created. And over to Benjamin. So, they're telling me my internet connection is unstable. Hopefully it'll be good enough for the next 20 minutes. So Benjamin, you write steampunk. So you're also a historian. Good for you, because otherwise I wonder how you would do it in the first place. When I read things like, I'm a big Anne Rice fan, and I really especially liked Servant of the Bones, that happens in Babylon and then moves throughout different epochs to the now. And I'm always amazed at how rich and real all those ancient societies feel. And so you, as a steampunk writer and as a historian, how do you manage to find that historical grounding and then spin off enough that you're able to create another reality from it? Because history is a trap, right? Just like research is a trap. There's so much happening.
I was about to answer.
What do you avoid? Yeah. Okay, please go ahead then.
Yeah, this is exactly what I was about to answer. World building is a trap, and a dangerous one, and history is a greater trap because it's infinite. You can spend hours to, I don't know, study ancient languages, mythologies, even letters that Roman soldiers sent back to their family from the Hadrian's Wall in UK, which obviously has absolutely nothing related to what you are currently writing, but is very interesting, so you get lost. to make a point, I don't think you need to consider history to write steampunk, for example, because steampunk is a genre with is its own tropes. So you can build a steampunk story if you want to, absolutely not considering uh, historical events. However, it is not what I do. What I am interested in is uchrony, so the way you divert history to make a fake one, a potential history. So for the Great Game, for example, my spy novel, it's a very basic idea that the Tsar, the Russian Tsar, has been killed at the beginning of the 19th century instead of the beginning of the 20th century, and I just imagine what it will be in this world. And what happened is that there is a new state, Russian state, that it is created, and this is in this state that the Industrial Revolution happens instead of the UK. And from there, you can create everything you want. So I think you absolutely don't need to consider history to write your fantasy novels or your steampunk novels. It's not necessary, but it will help to create a realistic world, in fact, because the history is real. We know so many things now about various history, and from food, from clothes, from the way people travel, the mechanical engines of Zeppelin, for example. We know all that. And one thing you have to consider, that readers love that. They love to be educated about history. When people, I've got some signing sessions, for example. They come to me and they ask questions not about the novel, but is this street real? Do they eat that? It's very funny. Even Turkish people, actually. That's weird. Yeah. Somebody, for example, told me that he has been born in the street where the adventurers, the characters are staying during the novel. And he was fascinated by the fact that it is like 3 numbers from his house. So history is a perfect material to create real deep, rich, and realistic world. But it is also a trap, because the world became the main character of your novel, which is bad, actually. You cited, I think, Erickson's books.
Yes.
Frankly, I think there is two groups of people reading that: the haters and the absolute lovers of that. It's very,
I'm a little bit of
it's
both.
yeah, yeah. I love Erickson because it's full and deep, but at the same times, I totally understand that it can be super boring to understand this super complex world where you know nothing about anything unless you read 3 or 4 books of the series. It's very complicated for. So I want my books to be as easy to enter as possible. I use history, but I don't abuse it. I don't base everything on that, because I know it can be very boring. And I write for readers. I don't write for myself only.
Right.
So this is, but yeah, as I am an historian, I have this tendency to get back to history to grab some ideas, because I know that in antique societies, for example, there is so many potential novels. Just read stuff about Babylonians, read stuff ancient Chinese, even Oceanian people. The trip that people did from Asia to Polynesia, for example, is just an incredible adventure novel. I know we should write something about that one time. So it's a great potential and a super trap at the same time, I think.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for that. And it's interesting. Stefan, you were talking about Brandon Sanderson. Benjamin, we were talking about how the world sometimes, and Stephen Erickson, feels a little bit too complex and too thick. I mean, I grew up with books, reading books out of sequence, essentially, like the Mallorean, yeah, the Mallorean, and I can't remember what they were, what the others were, but essentially a friend would have number 4, another friend would have number 2. I would just start with number 4, then I get to number 1. So it's I can see how hard it is within a series to also write something that works as a standalone. But interestingly enough, I met Steven Erikson a couple of months ago, and he disagrees with everything Brandon Sanderson says. He told me, he says he's a great writer, but I disagree with
Oops.
everything he has to say about world building. So you have two masters of fantasy coming from two completely different approaches to how they put their worlds together. But yeah, like you were saying, Benjamin, you know, history writing, spinning off of alternate history is difficult, but still the fact that you're a historian allows you to ground your reality in things that are interesting. Educating the public is always a great sales pitch. Obviously, Dan Brown's career is almost entirely built on that. Those little tidbits of information in all of his novels that just make them fascinating all of a sudden. But how far from your comfort zone do you guys go when it comes to world building? Are you staying within those places that you're familiar? Are you trying to learn new things for yourselves? What's the challenge for you in terms of either limiting yourselves to a space or expanding yourselves in the space?
That's a very good question.
No one wants to answer. Yeah, go ahead,
I'm going
please.
to borrow the Stefan methods. I think that the judge, the ultimate judge of your novel is what you want to say, is what is the theme, and the world, or at least for me, comes after that. For example, I'm currently writing the second book of a dark fantasy with monks, actually. And I wanted to talk about war, and more precisely religion war. And this is the first idea I had regarding what I wanted to do. And based on that, I completely go out my comfort zone, because I didn't know anything about the European religion wars. So I studied that. I studied the religion wars in Europe back in the 15th and 17th century. So I think you choose what you are going to do as research. You are going to out of your comfort zone based on the primal impulsion you have when you want to write a story. And you need this primal impulsion because you are going to stick with your story for months, even years. So it has to be very powerful. And if you've got this impulsion, you can go everywhere. I believe I'm going to write science fiction one day, and I'm sure I'm going to study astrophysics. I don't know, light travel, stuff like this. And actually, I think it's a joy. It's a joy to learn things through your art. Do that, please. Don't stay in your comfort zone. Learn new mythology, learn new culture, learn things, please, and it will enrich your art. So my answer to that, ma'am, is probably there is no comfort zone. There is only things you want to say, and be curious about that. There is no risk. The only risk you have is to discover things you didn't know, in fact. So this is probably the answer I can make to this tricky question, actually.
It is a super tricky question. Thank you for that, Benjamin. And it's you know that's a really good that's a really insightful thing for people to understand, is that there is no risk, because it's always a learning experience, and in the end you end up enriching yourself, and you never know when that information is going to be useful to your writing. It might be 5-10 years down the line that you're like, oh man, I remember this thing, and all of a sudden you have a novel that spills out of you and you have no idea how or why. Stefan, I saw you raise your hand. I just wanted to bounce off of what Benjamin was saying about mythologies, because that's something where Stephen is incredibly well versed. And that's at the heart of spirituality, mythologies, mysticism are really at the heart of a lot of Stephen's work. So I thought maybe he had some ideas to share or thoughts to share on what Benjamin was saying, or my incredibly tricky question, because I was running out of ideas.
Yeah, well, again, it comes back to cosmology in terms of what any group of people that you're writing about, whether they're imagined or real, or 1,000 years ago, you infusing some kind of belief system for them. You creating the kind of tenets of that civilization, that group of people, where they are in their world and time and space. Are they kind of, for us 2,000 years ago, the equivalent of that, or they thrown far ahead into the future? But the mythology will always play a part, whether it's somebody who's not a non-believer pushing against that in 200 years' time. But that's something that you can play with in terms of real worlds and imagined worlds. What is it that they believe? Because not all in our world, not everybody has a book that they follow as their guiding kind of teaching. In a lot of the African traditions, it's passed down orally. You have oral traditions on fables, legends. Those myths have a purpose, and they're not just for children. They're there as a guiding force in a ever evolving society. So when you want to imagine what that society is in 200 years' time, well, you need to understand where they've come from. And part of that is language, and how's that language evolved? If I were to write or want to create new words for a novel set in the UK, in Britain, if I want to create new words, I have to look to French and Latin. 40% of the English language is made up of French. So if I want new words, new sayings, and that kind of thing for an imagined world set there in 300 years' time, those are the languages that I need to look at. The Celtic language, and draw on all the beliefs that have kind of infused the land up until now. So, yeah, it can be, as Benjamin said, you end up going down all sorts of rabbit holes, and not all of it makes it to the tip of the iceberg, but you do that work, and that's really rewarding. And as Stefan said, the reader gets a sense that there is all of that behind a simple sentence, a simple proverb that you are creating. It has that weight behind it.
Thank you, Steve. Stefan, you had your hand up first, and then Michelle.
Yes, but I agree so much with Benjamin that I don't have a lot to add to what he said. But of course, when you create a new novel, quite often you need a new world. So you are creating something new. So of course you have to get out your comfort zone. But usually you go to something you are interested in. So that's not hard to do, because of course you will choose something you want to talk about because that you love it or you are interested in. So of course you will have to do some or a lot of research of stuff that you don't know about. But that's a joy, as he said. And of course, my first novel was about like fantasy world with giant trees. So I had to research about botany on the life of a tree. And my last book is about mountains. So that's completely different. And my next book will be about will be inspired by Lapland and Sami people with reindeers and stuff. But every time it's something I really interested about. So it's a way for me to discover things I like and go deeper and deeper on something I already like and I would like to know more about, and talk to readers about.
Right.
So.
Thank you, Stefan. Michelle?
Yes, well, because you're talking about getting out. I'm developing, because of the goggles there, it's because I'm developing a steampunk, but a futuristic steampunk universe. Okay, I stay in science fiction, in science, and the story there is set in that universe. It's the first I ever published. I have several short story written often. And I had to explore something that I didn't know much about, the history of the dirigibles, to see, okay, how would my people do that? And in that story, like the story I'm reading right now, they were like building a airship. And so how would they go with less resources? And I had to read, and it was so interesting to read that I end up eventually integrating what I learned in the story, but to keep it interesting in any way, no? So I just concur that it's fun to read a lot and to integrate history and like so if to build your civilization.
Gotcha. Thank you, Michelle. Stephen, did you have your hand up, or did I
Yeah,
restrict?
just quickly on that note on what we're talking about now. My new Saudi short story took me out of my comfort zone because I had to research sound and the effects of sound, because I was creating a scenario where a character is in a soundless environment, and how is he going to use his magic to get out of a place where he can't use his magic in theory. And so studying noise cancellation technology and all that kind of thing, which I would never normally do, actually gave me the answer to his predicament. Not just what the world, the environment would be like, but it solved my problem for me, and it really worked and took me way out of my comfort zone. So yeah, it can work really well for you.
Thanks for that, Steve. When it comes to building a civilization, and I think that's going to be our last question before we open it to the audience if they have any. What elements in human civilization can that you can't, which element, is there an element you cannot avoid when it comes to creating a new world? Would it be religion? Would it be war? Would it be sex? Would it be Trump's political drama? What part of what is so fundamental to you in human nature that you cannot imagine building your world without it?
Very fast. 10 seconds. In Mistress of the Winds is the Super Gardener civilization is a very sexist civilization for mostly biological evolution reasons, but they are fighting to get anyway because you have to acquire prestige and achievements, and so the women also manage to get prestige and achievement, but they have a lot of more obstacles than we have. So it's interesting I cannot write a society, of course, without thinking about the genres, and even if there are more than 2 genres.
Okay. All right. So gender for Michelle is an unavoidable factor. How society stratifies and codifies how different sexes interact with each other and their roles and responsibilities. Stefan?
Yeah, but maybe my answer will not be so deep as religion or story or something, but I will talk about food because, well,
French team.
Yes, French team. I am interested in food. I like cooking and I like eating. I had a chance to travel a lot and see how different food could be when you move into the world on different countries. And I think if there is really something that I talk about in my fantasy books, in every book, that is actually food.
All right, so we have a foodie here. Yeah, true. Can't imagine a society without good eats, and conversely, terrible eats. So you can put the good eats in perspective. Stephen, over to you.
Definitely belief systems with communication, how people communicate, and how they, because I like existential questions for characters. I like to push their kind of boundaries and what they think they know versus what they're about to learn. And yeah, it's just, I like to have a broad idea of what a society can can do with, the fundamentals, whether they are pushing against traditional beliefs or whether they are pushing their traditional beliefs, and just what that means for any group of people. Yeah.
All right. So far, gender, food, and beliefs. And Benjamin?
As Stefan stole my answer, I was, but I add a
French
plus
people
one
only
to
have one
food.
answer to this question, by the way. It's always food. But please, Benjamin.
Yeah, I think I'm in the Stefan team for I really need to know what people believes, what is the geopolitical system, because it is so constraintful for my characters. So I think I really need to know how politics works, how beliefs or religion, if there is any religion existing in the world, work. This is something very important for me. But it's supposed that I'm writing about a human society, and frankly, I don't know what will happen if I write about a non-human society or something else. So let's say this answer is for human like society, and I will try to figure in the following days what will be the most important things about a non-human society.
Food.
Nice one.
Who or what you eat. Man, I wish I had thought of that actually, because yeah, non-human societies, it's easy to talk about reflections of ourselves, right? But what if you have to really conceptualize the other, not just because of a different skin tone or a different sexual orientation, but a completely different realm of thought and belonging.
Okay.
Guys, this has been, oh, well, please. No. Go ahead, Michelle. Give us
No, for that civilization, therefore, they believe the great gardeners seeded the universe. So,
Mhm.
and no, there's a theology, there's a mythology in that civilization, and there's a political system too. So, no, it took me some years to create that universe. So it's always added with more layers.
Yeah. It's about layering, isn't it? Layering and layering and layering and the subtlety that involves. Guys, this has been a wonderful conversation. Benjamin, I don't know if in the audience anybody wants to shoot us a little curveball right before we're supposed to sign out.
I said no, apparently not.
No.
So there is no solution. We have been a real boring discussion, or we did great.
Yeah, or you just floored everybody. Well, look, guys, now you know what comes into good world building, everything, apparently, and also absolutely nothing. Start with where your heart guides you and just see where it takes it from there, and let the characters do the talking and the thinking for you. If does anybody have a last word of advice for our viewers or lack thereof?
Ugh.
I think I will keep it simple.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
Science fiction is like chocolate. You can make it as rich in cocoa or as rich in sugar, more accessible sugar as you want.
Yeah, and always remember, 100% cocoa is not good. You don't want to eat
Yes,
100% cocoa
exactly.
chocolate.
And I will say that don't forget that writing is about the art of illusion.
Yes.
So don't forget that your word is an illusion. You don't have to describe all of it. So think useful. Try to keep it simple and useful for you, of course, but also for your readers, for your story. So sometimes don't explore your world because it's not necessary, in fact.
All right. And Stephen?
Yeah, I would say that's what book 2 and book 3 are, and book 4 are for, adding to that world. So yeah, especially when you create a world. I mean, like we have with the Celtic verse, you just want to keep writing in that world, especially when another writer writes something and it sparks an idea in you, and you just want to add more to that world. It just keeps on growing. So yeah, and with novels, that's why you end up with a novel series, because you buy into your own world and you want to kind of push at the boundaries that you've created in the first novel. So yeah.
All right. All right. Well, thanks again, guys, for taking the time. Thank you for all the different and wonderful perspectives and the insight offered. To everybody viewing, I think all these panels will be online eventually.
Yeah, they will.
So
immediately, in fact, just
immediately. Oh,
wait, yeah,
excellent.
immediately.
Oh, great, great, great. So everybody who wasn't paying any attention to what we were saying, you can do it now. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful, wonderful day and a great
You
weekend.
too, ma'am, and thanks a lot for
Wonderful.
your invitation and animation. It was
Yeah.
great.
Merci,
Thanks a lot
Mom.
for you.
Appreciate it.
Enjoy
Appreciate it.
Thank you a lot.
Kinshasa, please. Enjoy
Thanks.
Kinshasa for me.
Have a good one.
Salutations to everyone watching. And
Thank you,
Bye.
Michel. Bye.
au revoir.
Thank you.
Au
Bye.
revoir.